this shows a trip of 2020. That's not true. It was 2019. So this trip was done about 18 months ago, and it was hosted by Indiana University Alumni Association, which both my wife and I attended Indiana University, and it was managed by AHI Travel, which is sometimes known as Alumni Holidays, Inc. It's a limited number of 28 participants. AHI itineraries tend to be somewhat pricey, but this is the third tour we've done with AHI, and we've always been really satisfied with them. Their accommodations and services are just really excellent. Since Indiana University alumni took just 16 of the available slots, AHI was able to fill another 11 with alumni from the University of Oklahoma, and I think there was a couple from Wichita State University as well. So we have a total of 27 of us on this tour. So we started out from Savannah through Philadelphia with a direct flight to London, and with a little layover in London, and then a direct flight down to Cape Town. So this is a map of Southern Africa, basically the area that we covered. We were in South Africa, we were in Zimbabwe, and we were also in Botswana, but also very close to Mozambique, and very close to Zambia, and very close to Namibia. It's just across the border in all those cases. But the first 5 days were in the Cape Town area, and that included day trips to the Stellenbosch wine region, to Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for 16 years, the Cape of Good Hope, and also we visited an African penguin nesting colony. So this is actually a photo of a postcard, presumably taken from a helicopter, that's showing you the Cape Town area. And this area, we visited much of this area. Our hotel, you see the little red dot, was about right there. And the Stellenbosch wine region was out in this region behind these mountains. Robben Island is out here. It's off this photograph. And then Cape of Good Hope is back here. So we stayed 5 nights at the Mount Nelson Hotel. This is the entrance of the hotel. Notice that the car coming out of the driveway there, it's on the left side. I mean, that's how it's all the British. And also notice the flags standing straight out. Cape Town is one of the windiest cities in the world, partly due to its location at the confluence of the very cold Atlantic Ocean and the warm Indian Ocean. The wind was so strong that at times we actually had to grab a light post to keep from getting blown over. It was amazingly strong, almost the entire time we were there. This is the courtyard of the hotel. The Mount Nelson Hotel is also known as the Pink Lady. It has been continuously operating since 1899, and it was painted pink the first time in 1919 as an expression of the owner's joy at learning of the end of World War I. And it's actually a palette number. It's called the Pink Lady, that color. Very British. This is normal afternoon high tea in the best of British tradition. So on our first day trip outside of Cape Town, we stopped at the village of Stellenbosch out in the wine region. Um, just a little oak shaded, oak shade trees lining the streets, along with just a number of cafes, boutiques, art galleries, and of course, wine shops. The climatic conditions in the Stellenbosch wine region are very just ideal for producing high quality red and white wine varieties. So our visit, our wine visit was included 3 stops at wineries for sampling, tours, and also lunch at one of them. A couple of weeks before we left for the trip, we had Marilyn and I had dinner at the Bluffton House in Old Town Bluffton, and we enjoyed a South African red wine with a Simon Sig label. So we were surprised that our itinerary included a visit to the winery by the same name. The oak that they use in these barrels is all locally grown oak. So the wine and the oak barrels they are stored in come from the same region. So we had one free kind of unplanned day during the 5-day stay that we were in Cape Town. And for that one day, we chose to visit the Cape Town waterfront and then visit the aquarium. So we took dozens of photos inside the aquarium, but this is the only one I'm including in here because it's kind of an unusual display. You can see these giant mantas with scuba divers inside the tank. They were feeding the mantas fish by hand. So the mantas would swim up to them and they would hand them a fish and they would swim off with the fish. This was right outside the aquarium. I've never been to a shipyard before, and it was just right out there. I thought it was very curious. So I just decided to throw it in here. Unfortunately, the photograph doesn't really do justice to the size of this thing. It was absolutely immense. But it was just interesting for me to see it, so I just threw it in there. So our next day trip was out to the Cape of Good Hope, and this is basically a biology stop along the way. The mountains in the background are the chain of mountains that lead down from Cape Town all the way down to the Hope. These are actually called the 12 Apostle Mountains. The roadway along the mountains offered really spectacular views of a very, very mostly rugged coastline. But there were beaches kind of dotting this whole coastline. Every now and then you see this white beach with a beautiful white sand. But you can see there's nobody in that water. That water is absolutely frigid. There are people walking along the beach, but you don't see anybody in the water. So this is the entrance to the Cape of Good Hope. It's a national park. Besides offering views of its famous geography, it's also a wildlife preservation area, so that we did see quite a bit of plains type of wildlife in there. So this is it. This was right outside the visitor center. I don't know why it says the most southwestern point. It's the most southern point, certainly not the most western point of the African continent. So in order to get up to see really the confluence of the two oceans, the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean, you had to do a little work to get up there to the viewing point. This is where literally east meets west. So you've got the warm Indian Oceans over here on the east, meeting the really icy Atlantic Ocean. It creates this perpetual dense fog that just about as far as you can see it, it's just a line of fog out through there. And this is really, this is what caused this area to be called the Cape of Good Hope, because sailors back in the 16th, 17th century were hoping they could get through this thing because it was just a almost zero visibility and huge rock shoals out in there. So hundreds and hundreds of wrecks. So on the way back, we visited an African penguin colony. We had no idea there were penguins in South Africa, but there they are at Boulder Beach. They say that there are over 3,000 penguins at this beach site. So mom and dad would take turns alternately shading their baby and then going off and dipping into the ocean to cool off and feed, and then bring back feed to the baby. And I thought this was kind of interesting. Notice the traffic pattern. It was this way the entire time we were there. We had penguins going out on the right and returning on the left. They just didn't get in each other's way. So our final day in the Cape Town area, we took a morning ferry out to Robben Island, which was home to South Africa's most famous prisoner, Nelson Mandela. The island is really reminiscent of Alcatraz off the coast of California. When we got to the island, we were met by a former prisoner. This guy was a prisoner along with Nelson Mandela, and he was our guide through the prison facility itself. So Robben Island housed political prisoners from 1964 to 1982. And Mandela was there for 16 of those years. Criminals that were convicted of non-political crimes were separated from the political prisoners. The political inmates were kept in old buildings, old rock buildings that were former leper colony barracks. And this was Mandela's cell, and those are his comfort items. It was a cell about 8 by 8, something like that. This is where non-political prisoners were kept. They were in much newer buildings, and they had much improved hygienic facilities. After he got released, Mandela returned to Robben Island in 1995 and gave a speech to about 1,300 other former prisoners at the lime mine where they had worked together. And after his speech, Mandela picked up a large stone and placed it in the middle of the mine, saying that that rock should be a reminder of their solidarity. All 13 participants also picked up a rock and added it onto Mandela's, and they created the rock pile, which has remained intact as a memorial for the last 25 years. So after taking the ferry back to the mainland, we were fortunate that the wind died down enough that it would allow us to take the cable car up Table Mountain. That the cable car had been closed the previous 4 days we were there because the wind was just too strong. They couldn't risk it. But the cable car carries passengers up more than 2,500 vertical feet from the base of the rock wall. The carriage itself revolves 360 degrees, so every passenger gets a view of every direction on the way up and on the way down. For those more queasy passengers, the center of the car has seating and it's stationary, so it looks out only one way. From the base station, it doesn't really seem like it's all that high up to the top, the 2,500 feet. But notice the side of the mountain right here as you get up to the very top to the station. The next slide is taken from right there, looking out this direction. Looks a lot higher, and it really was. It was a spectacular view. So this is the view from the top, looking down onto Cape Town and the Crescent Harbor. The Pink Lady was right down there, just barely view. You could barely view it from up there. But notice that the sky was almost crystal clear when we first arrived. But within about a half an hour of being up there, reaching the top, kind of a foggy haze began developing around the top of the mountain. And by the time we were getting ready to go back down, the valley floor had completely disappeared. It just completely disappeared, and we were in a cloud. But once we got down in the valley, again, the overhead sky was absolutely clear, but the clouds were rolling off a mountain. This is where we'd been about an hour before that. And apparently this is almost a daily occurrence. These clouds will roll in about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they just spend the night rolling down off the mountain. So from Cape Town, we flew to Hoedspruit, right up here. It was very near the Kruger National Park and the border with Mozambique. From the little airport in Hoedspruit, we transferred into a little motorboat or motor vehicle and went down to the Thorny Bush Nature Reserve, which is just at the edge of the Kruger National Park. And we stayed there 3 nights at the Waterside Lodge. Each couple had a separate standalone cabin that was really very nicely appointed. It was like any other hotel room, but these are all individual little cabins, very comfortably air conditioned. This is actually being taken from a little coffee nook that's just off the bathroom that's over here. Notice the mosquito nets. Didn't have any problem with mosquitoes while we were there. All meals, every lunch, dinner, and breakfast were served al fresco. From the lodge, we went out on 6 safari trips, 3 in the morning and 3 afternoon evening trips. Our group of 27 was divided into 4 teams, each team including a safari vehicle, a ranger/driver, and a tracker. And the teams stayed together for all 6 trips into the bush. So this is us on our first trip out in first safari with our tracker Frank sitting up on, he's literally sitting on a bumper chair. And he was a native Zulu tribesman. And he would watch the trail in front of us and determine where the animals were headed and what was headed in which directions. And then this was Simon. And Simon had been a ranger at the Kruger National Park and came to work at this organization. just this year. Notice that there's this rifle right on the dash, ready to get out of its case if necessary. So this was our very first wild animal sighting. He was about 100 feet away from the safari trail. But shortly followed after that were giraffes. The giraffes seemed very curious. That, they really like to get a good look at strangers. And so they seemed to travel in groups, and they came right out of the bush. Of course, we were really excited to see our very, very first pachyderm, not realizing that we would see lots of them. Now, we didn't see many of these guys. These are really shy black rhinoceros. They're shy, but extremely unpredictable and dangerous. Those previous slides were the first evening out. Now, this is the next morning. They would wake us up at 5 o'clock in the morning, a 5 o'clock wake-up call to be down at the safari exit place at 5:30 in the morning. And so the sun was just coming up, and the tracker, Frank, actually heard these hyenas off in the distance munching on some bones. And we found them over here feeding off of a prior evening's lion's kill. And literally you could hear, once we got closer, we could also hear them munching on the bones. The impalas, these guys right here, zebras and giraffes tend to herd together. We saw this fairly often, that we would see these, particularly these three species, right together, for mutual protection. The impalas have incredibly good ears, while the giraffes have good sight because they're so high, and the zebras just get in between them because they don't have very good sight nor very good ears. These are just boys being boys. These are basically teenage elephants that are play fighting. And again, this was the first time we saw this behavior, but we saw it quite often, really. This was an interesting photo. As we were going down the trail, there were two young baby elephants that, one of which literally charged us. And Frank, the tracker, put his legs out in front of him like an elephant trunk almost. And the baby stopped, but his ears were completely flared out. His trunk was extended straight out, as well as his tail. And this guy was on his way to join the charge, but his mother kind of rushed up to him and pulled him aside. Don't know exactly what the signal was, but she wasn't going to let him get in trouble. So lots of birds. This is an African fish eagle. Notice the similarity to our bald eagle. It's smaller than a bald eagle, but very, very similar in its markings. This was one of a group of giraffes, but I took this photograph because of these appendages along its spine. And these are oxpecker birds. You can see it right here. And they feed on insects and in other parasites that crawl around on the giraffe's coats. This guy might look a little bit sleepy-eyed and lazy, but we were told by our guide or our tracker that this is one of the most dangerous animals in the African bush, the Cape buffalo. Very short-tempered, very quick on its feet, and very unpredictable. This animal is the largest of the antelope family. It's called the greater kudu. Notice the spiral horns. These are 4 or 5 feet long. So this is one of the evenings. We were just about finished with an evening safari when the tracker heard about this leopard from one of the other trackers. I mean, the sun was just setting, but we were able to come up, and here he is, draped over this big limb, basically sleeping off its evening meal. There was a part of an impala hanging off this side of the tree. But as we were there, the sun was going down. We were able to get around the other side of him and shine a light up on, and the guy never woke up. This is why they call this thorny bush. This is the thorny acacia. These thorns are about 2 inches long and just needle sharp. And this is the acacia plant. It's actually one of the giraffe's favorite food sources. We had one opportunity to kind of get off the trail and do a hike through the bush. Everybody in single file behind Ranger Simon, and here he is with his 50 caliber rifle. Ranger Simon said that he has never in his career had to actually point a rifle at an animal, but you know, they take it out for precaution anyway. More of the birds. This is a red hornbill, heavily hunted, still heavily hunted for its beak as an aphrodisiac. And this is a yellow hornbill, very similar bodies, but different color in the beaks. So we saw a number of lion prides, and this was at least one adult male and maybe some juvenile males in the group. There were 15 in this pride that we were able to count. And as we were going up towards these lions, we found a lone bull elephant that was almost charging, almost running in the same direction that we were heading. And Simon told us that elephants will not tolerate lions in their territory. And so he said that, you know, that elephant is certainly coming over here to chase these lions off. And this male lion could hear the elephant bellowing in the background, took a look, and went over to his ladies and says, "Let's get out of here." And they all, by the time that we, just probably within a minute after this picture was taken, they were all gone.
Bill, what cameras are you using?
I used one camera. You know, I have you know, a good amount of photo equipment, but we were warned that on the African flights, on the African airlines, that we could only have a maximum of 15 pounds of carry-on luggage. And if you put all of the cameras and the lenses, et cetera, together, which I did, I was at 25 pounds, and I really didn't want to check it through. So I ended up just getting a Lumix. I don't know if you're familiar with the Panasonic DC SD200. It's a Lumix camera that was very light, and it has a 15x zoom. So it zooms from about 40 to about 500 millimeters, and really pretty good. I was satisfied with it. Not, you know, not the quality of photos that I like to have, but it worked. So this was our team. This was our last night, and we were the Thorny Bush hosted what they called a sundowner. So we stopped here. This was Frank, our tracker, Simon, our guide, and all of our team. And these are all Indiana University alumni. The staff had come out and set up tables and in a clearing, and they just had an array of snacks and appetizers and about any kind of beverage that you might want to ask for. And that's what we stopped for, the sundown. So from Hoedspruit, after those safaris, we flew down to Johannesburg, where we overnighted, and then we motor coached the next morning up to Pretoria, which is the official capital of South Africa, to board the Rovos Trail, or the Rovos Rail train to Zimbabwe. So this is the track into Zimbabwe. We stop at Hwange National Park for a safari, and then our final destination being Victoria Falls, final on the train. So this is the entrance to the Rovos Rail Terminal. We were greeted by a red carpet check-in service, I mean, literally, and served unlimited champagne and canapes while we were waiting to board the train. The Rovos Rail bills itself as the most luxurious railroad in the world. The train cars have been restored to 19th century European luxury cars. This was our stateroom. It included a king size bed, a full private bath, and I'm taking the photograph from the bath. There's my little Lumix camera right there. The whole, our area occupied 1/3 of a rail car. So after dinner, we came back, and this was the turn down service. And the turn down service included a bottle of champagne and a box of chocolates. This is the dining car. This is actually the breakfast service. All meals and beverages, and literally beverage of choice, are included in the fare. It's kind of like a Club Med on wheels. The meals were, especially dinner, truly gourmet. Jackets and ties required of men and at dinner service, and tuxedos and ladies' evening gowns were really encouraged. If you didn't feel like getting dressed for dinner, well, room service was available to you, but most people were down here. This is the bar car. It opened at 4 p.m. to offer before dinner cocktails, beers, wines, and then just a variety of sweet and savory snacks. So this was the train stopped at the Zimbabwe border, and this is right on the border, in order to clear immigration. And we were there a good 2 hours. And as we were there, a line of Zimbabwean laborers were crossing the border. So they're going back where we came from, into South Africa in foot caravans, looking for jobs in South Africa. The Zimbabwean economy, it's been in shambles now for years, and there aren't a lot of jobs. So this guy came up to the train, spoke very good English, and explained to us what was going on back here. Along the way, we're passing quite a few of these little traditional Zulu villages. The train is moving, and so it's not really in good focus, but you can get an idea that these little villages, and they were just every couple of miles you'd see these little settlements, and these are very traditional Zulu villages where the the matriarchs and the patriarchs would live in one building, and then their children and cousins, etc., would be off in little huts to the side. So this is the stop at the Hwange National Park, where we stopped for a safari through the Zimbabwean bush. And of course, the local Zulu natives know the train schedule, and they were there eagerly awaiting the arrival of the tourists. This was a government communications tower that loomed right up over the tracks at the station, and just attracted a huge colony of local residents, baboons. Kind of adds a new perspective to monkey bars. So this is out on the safari, and once again, the first animal we saw was a zebra. And here's Mama Zebra feeding his young. Now the animals in this case tended to be much farther off, so the resolution on the camera, I was reaching out as far as I could with the zoom on some of these, especially with this one. This is a very rare and very shy saddle-billed stork, and it was spotted off in the distance by our spotter and making its way through the grasses. The tracker also found this lone cheetah. Nobody would have seen it on the safari except the tracker knew it was out there. Those cheetah off in the distance. He was probably a good 200 yards from the trail. And again, this is reaching out as far as I could with that lens. It was really hot this day, and this elephant knew exactly what he wanted to do. He was able to keep himself cool. First time we'd seen this bird. This is just an absolutely beautifully colored Ethiopian roller, almost iridescent, about the size of an American crow. And this guy is kind of almost a fish out of water. It's really a grassland bird that was standing up on a stump, and it's a red-necked francolin, similar to our pheasants. So from Hwange, it was a relatively short lunchtime train ride from Hwange National Park to our destination of Victoria Falls. So this is getting off the train at Victoria Falls. This is another photo of a postcard. Victoria Falls is the largest sheet of falling water in the world. It's 350 feet high and more than a mile long from here to over here. The Zambezi River separates Zambia on this side and Zimbabwe on this side. This bridge connects the two nations across the Victoria Gorge. There were 16 viewing places along here that we walked. So we walked basically 1 mile, which was half the distance. So we walked a half mile here and then a half mile back along this trail. So this was the first of the 16 viewing spots. And as we started out, we were issued these blue slickers. Well, it was a hot day, and you can see the mist is on the camera here, but it was so hot under those slickers that we soon took those off and decided it was better just to let the mist get us as opposed to being wet from the inside. But you really cannot see the falls, the entire falls, from any one point. It winds around a little bit. So that's why they have the 16 viewing spots. This was a panorama of the spot where I could see more of the falls than any place else. So this probably covered, maybe 30% of the length of the falls. And this was the Victoria Gorge. This was the last viewing spot, right next to the bridge that connects Zimbabwe and Zambia. While we were at Victoria Falls, we stayed 3 nights at the Victoria Falls Hotel. The hotel was built in 1904 and has hosted a number of members of the British royal family, including visits by King George VI, as well as 2 visits by Queen Elizabeth. This was from the back courtyard and looking over toward the falls. And you can see the mist rising in the distance from the falls, and that's that bridge that we talked about. So inside, it's the hotel is traditional European architecture, but it blended flawlessly with an African safari motif. Notice the kudus. This is the famous Livingstone room, and it was where our final group dinner was held. The Livingstone room has consistently been rated one of the finest restaurants in the world. It achieved, in 2013, it achieved a 7th place global ranking. Another of the interior courtyards featured an original Victoria Falls trolley car, which is basically like 2 very large park benches back to back on rails, or on rail wheels. And these were lowered and lowered down to the falls and then returned tourists back to the hotel. And there's this little plaque in here, and I'll just read this to you. It says, the Victoria Falls Hotel Trolley Service, which operated from the hotel to the bridge and the boathouse, was introduced in 1920. Before this date, hotel guests were conveyed to various points of interest by means of rickshaws. During their life, the trolleys were used by some 2 million guests and were replaced by motor coaches in December of 1957 after 37 years of romantic and reliable service. So from Victoria Falls, we did another day trip over into Botswana to the Chobe National Park. Elegant entrance to the park. So the day trip at the national park included a morning land safari, lunch at the Chobe Lodge, and then an afternoon river safari. So this is loaded up for our land safari in the morning. This was interesting, is you got 2, really highly cantankerous animals in close proximity, a hippo and a Cape buffalo. Very unusual to see them so close to each other. I guess this is what happens to fallen buffalo. This was an African hooded vulture getting his last meal, or getting a meal from the last fallen buffalo. So the park is bordered on the north by the Chobe River, which separates Botswana and Namibia. So the trees over here are just beyond the river. And so those are Namibian trees. Hippopotamus were really they were very rare in the South African bush. We only saw a couple of them from a really long way off, but they were thriving and numerous in the Chobe River Basin. Notice right here in the middle, the juvenile, little baby, resting its head against his mother's side. And it was located literally in the middle of the herd, obviously for protection from predators, such as this guy. This is the Nile crocodile, and its population is also thriving. So these reptiles will eat fish, but they really prefer baby hippos. Another fish eagle that would swoop down, got a fish, was not able to get the the camera out and ready to go before he landed in the tree, but he has a fish right down there pulling it apart. Excuse me. We were told that we were really fortunate to see these guys. This is a mating pair of African sacred ibis, which is a declining population species. These birds they're called sacred ibis because the ancient Egyptians actually had a god whose head was this ibis. This is the African olive baboon, and this is not a declining population. These guys were everywhere. I guess they thrive because they're extremely adaptable. They literally eat everything, just kind of like we do, and so they just adapt. This is another leopard that was way off in the distance. You could not see it. We had a couple with binoculars. They could not see this. The tracker told us that there was a leopard between two trees off in the distance, and it was shady enough that you really couldn't even see it with the binoculars. But this was at my longest lens, and then zoomed in, cropped from there to be able to find that leopard back there. Botswana has the highest population density of elephants in the world. And, as we were going through the countryside, we just saw numerous herds of elephants. Again, those inquisitive giraffes, coming out to take a look. The lunch at the lodge consisted of a buffet that was back here, of just a variety of local tasty dishes, most of which I really didn't know what it was, but they were all good. So after lunch, we boarded the safari barge for the Safari River barge. It turns out really large herds of Cape buffalo were congregated in these lush grasses along the river's edge. The ubiquitous cattle eater. And then we were again lucky to get to actually see a very highly unusual sighting of a hippo out of water. Very unusual that hippo comes out of the water. But herds of elephants were almost as common along the riverbanks as were the Cape buffalo. And this was the last beautiful bird that I took a photograph of on this trip. It was a red bishop singing in the river reeds. So we were at the end of the river trip. This was the Indiana University crew. They unfurled the school colors. We all got together for a quick group photo. So from Victoria Falls, we flew back down to Johannesburg and then basically reverse courses. And that is it. I'll be glad to take any questions that might have come up.
Thank
I do have a question. Was that also called the Blue Train, the train you took up to Victoria Falls?
Rovos Rail.
Okay, not the Blue Train. Is that another?
I don't know about the Blue Train.
Oh, okay, because I know that goes from South Africa up into and it's a grand ride, I'm told.
Yeah. Well, it was surprising. I had no idea what we're getting into with the Rovos Rail, but I had always heard that the Orient Express was the most luxurious railroad, and our tour guide that was with us the entire time from AHI he lives in France, and I asked him about this, their claim of being the most luxurious, and he said, well, when you compare the cars themselves, the Rovos Rail to the Orient Express, so the cars themselves are equivalent. They're about the same. So there are differences in the services. He said the Orient Express is on a European rail system that has wider rails than the African rails, which is kind of a narrow gauge. So there's less rocking on the Orient Express than there is on Rovos Rail. But he said the Orient Express, if you want a glass of wine, it's $12. If you want a glass of water, it's $8. If you want a cup of coffee, it's $5. Where on Rovos Rail, that's all included in the price. So it's a little more convenient from that perspective. And he said the other difference is that all the meals on Rovos Rail are served in the dining car, including breakfast. And the breakfast is served on the Orient Express only in your rooms by room service. So that's all I know about that. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Any other questions for Bill today?
Okay.
Bill, go ahead.
No, I said, okay, great.
Thank
Well,
you,
thank you
Bill.
for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Oh, Bill,
Thank you.
so much.
That was great.
I just have a couple of announcements for everyone. The October meeting is going to be on the second Tuesday, October 13th.